Welcome to NYREJ Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Kaplan. My guest today is Jeremy Casey, and he is with SR Commercial. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing great. So, Jeremy, tell me a little bit about Jeremy, and tell me a little bit about SR Commercial.
Sure. So my name's Jeremy Casey. We're headquartered out of the Springfield, Massachusetts market. I live in East Longmeadow, Massachusetts. I've got 3 kids, 6, 4, and 1. Been married and with the same beautiful bride for now almost 20 years. We met in college. And really, that's, I guess, where my career started. I grew up in the Berkshires and went to Westfield State for my undergrad, went to AIC for my master's. And during the beginning part of my career, I was in commercial banking and savings and loans and a super regional. So I was a commercial lender, and that's where my background really started. Was understanding commercial finance, and really took that knowledge. I never really wanted to stay in banking; it was a little too rigid for me. But took that experience, did the startup thing, fundraised for a tech startup that I created with a couple other great people. And then this has actually been my second startup. So SR Commercial started about 6 years ago, out of just candidly, I think that I thought that the market was really ripe for disruption. I noticed that the median age was, similar to that of the machining world, which was in the 50s to 60-year-old, benchmark specifically in the Western Massachusetts market. And so left banking cold turkey and, linked up with my now business partner. He said pretty much, hey, listen, I don't know anything about commercial. I said, well, you got a broker's license. I don't. I know a lot about commercial. And he goes, listen, get a deal done. And that was the first deal of what is over 500 plus transactions in that time. We've done over, I think, 130 million in volume in that time frame as well. We currently have 10 agents and brokers. We represent pretty much the full state of Massachusetts, full state of Connecticut. Our main markets, I would say, are Greater Springfield and Greater Hartford. We've grown. We do everything from, we're a full service commercial real estate brokerage. So everything landlord, buyer, tenant, and seller rep. We even do a significant amount of consulting work. We have our own property management, and commercial as well. I guess the thing to cap it off is I also coach commercial real estate brokers across the country.
All very interesting. We talked before, and you have a similar philosophy that I have, and that is try to put your hands on almost everything you can connected to the industry, so you know a little bit about everything.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, because I got a lot of pushback on this industry when I was trying to understand and learn more about it, because obviously I think in a lot of cases it's a highly competitive industry. Unlike residential, where people are looking to co-broke and pretty much have to most of the time work with each other. In commercial, it's not as cooperative, let's just say. And so, but everyone that was open to discussing, what I should and shouldn't do in commercial pretty much said, you got a niche. And, I think that is somewhat applicable if you're an individual agent. However, if you're building a brokerage and you're in a tertiary market like Western Massachusetts or, Hartford, you kind of specialize in the location. But as a, owner of a brokerage, I need to be at least dangerous on every front, whether it be from, a build to suit QSR deal, or let's say a reposition of industrial, real estate, or, an office conversion. You name it, like I need to have, a significant amount of knowledge in each asset class, because my brokers and agents are working in all of those. So I think that's one of the things that separated me and also helped us kind of grow as quickly as we did. because, it's hard to niche with 10 agents and brokers in one market and in one asset class. So yeah, I mean, I've tried to be a sponge and have the opportunity to learn and absorb as much information from as many great people as possible.
So Jeremy, tell me, what's it like working in a market like Springfield and Holyoke and Chicopee, those areas where for years no one really paid much attention to that?
It's a great question. I mean, here's the deal. I love it because, first of all, that's where a lot of my lending clients were. But also, there's a lot of indies out there. There's not a lot of big groups because, again, the deal size is not to where they would really entertain it. I don't care. I've done a deal as small as a single office that's, a 500 square foot executive office space to, I think the largest deal we're kind of working on right now is working with ski resorts and doing hospitality developments for multiple ski resorts. And so I think that's the real interesting thing. Like when you're looking in, let's say, New York City or a major metro area, you're kind of handcuffed to multifamily, industrial, office, and retail. But most cases, you're probably looking at, if you're major downtown metro, office, retail, and multifamily. In Western Massachusetts, we've done everything from represent ski resorts to represent major breweries. We just did a huge deal a couple of years ago with Treehouse Brewing, which was a major, improvement to a town. It really, the sky's the limit. So, in Western Massachusetts, there's pretty much every flavor of commercial. And I think that's the interesting part about working in Western Massachusetts, because you could be doing a requirement for, let's say, the federal government to, a mom and pop, to, a full-on reposition of an old machine shop and precision manufacturing property and make it converted into, the next best use. So I think that's the interesting thing that I find about being in these markets where, as opposed to a larger, metro or a primary market, you don't have all of that, opportunity to work in as many different colors of the industry as we do.
Well, now the areas of Springfield and Holyoke and those areas starting to get noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And I just heard something about maybe the train even going through the Springfield all the way up to Hartford, which that is going to make a tremendous difference in the area.
100%. That's a huge thing. You saw what it did for Worcester, and look at what Kelly Square became. Worcester in a really, people will say 10 years, I'll say 5 years. And again, you can tie it to the COVID boom, but Worcester exploded. It was on the top 10 chart as far as, development in the nation, pretty much for almost like 3 years straight in this past 5-year opportunity. I think Springfield, you can look at the average price points in Worcester and then Springfield market. Springfield's nearly half on a residential basis. So I think there's a significant amount of value there. The train, the train opportunity, we already have a brand new state-of-the-art train facility in Union Station. I'm actually going to ICSC in, I think it's 2 weeks. And I'm actually taking the train out of Springfield to go to New York City. And I do that every time I go, because candidly, it's dirt cheap. I don't have to pay for parking. It goes right into Penn Station. It's 3.5 hours. Yeah, it's a little longer than the commute to New York City, but I don't have to deal with traffic and I can work the whole way. So, we already have that infrastructure, and I think that's going to be a huge boom for this side of Springfield, as well as there's a lot of development activity that's already at play, with the casino. Say about it what you want, but the Court Square development, which was 60 market rate houses. And that was a 30-year, vacillation of development. And then also the Clock Tower building, which is literally directly behind me. That's 90 market rate houses from a Chicago developer. So, there is a lot of activity, which is quite reminiscent of early Kelly Square days in Worcester. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I'm speaking and acting because I own the property I'm sitting in, which is literally at State and Main in downtown Springfield.
But see, now that's where I see that you're going to have some differences from 5 years ago, because now the cost to develop anywhere in the Boston or the greater Boston area is just almost undoable. I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost impossible. Where you go to a place like Springfield, Worcester, those areas, it's reasonable market rate real estate, and it makes it more affordable to develop.
And you're spot on. I think that's one of the things that Springfield has been talking about in this area, has been Western Mass has been talking about for quite some time. I think the real catalyzing moment was Worcester wasn't there. Now it is. Now Worcester's too expensive. And if you look at Springfield, it's, we can call it all the different names we call it, but it's the gateway to New England. So you have 90 and 91 running directly through it. It's an hour and 45 minutes to Boston driving. It's an hour and 45 minutes to New York City. And so there's not a lot of places that can say that. And not to mention, we have pretty solid infrastructure in this market. Your average home price is, right around the 300 and 10 to 325,000, whereas that of Worcester is much higher. And so the affordability, which everyone's talking about, affordability crisis. Listen, Springfield's extremely affordable. And we have a lot of higher learning institutions, great medical care, but you can get anywhere really, really quickly, and it's accessible. And I think that's one of the things where I think there's a huge opportunity. So I agree with you 100%. I think, we've all been waiting for this to happen in this market. And I think it's just about to occur, given, a lot of the factors in the surrounding markets.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I don't think even people that live in Massachusetts and the Rhode Island and Connecticut areas, I don't think they realize what that let's say the hub of Springfield, what that really means as far as attracting people from so many different areas with the highways, easy access. It's
there's very little traffic here, and that's actually one of the reasons why I didn't go out to Boston. I didn't go out to Hartford, and the reason being is because I hate traffic. I mean, our logistical nightmares or issues of highway congestion are that of pretty much just the strip that is right behind this building, in between like the viaduct of 291 and 91 and really the Longmeadow Curve. So it's really only like a mile or a mile and a half strip. And whereas if you were to go to even Worcester and you're on 290, which I was this weekend, that is gridlocked. I mean, anywhere around Boston inside 128, 495, gridlocked. Like, we don't have those, issues. I mean, listen, I'm sure as we grow, they will. But at the end of the day, that's one of the things I think that's been really easy to attract people, to live in this market. And also now a lot of, prospective employers coming in this market, because there is so many higher, education institutions, and, especially on the industrial and warehousing and logistics front, you've got so many opportunities between 291, 391, 90, 91, where you've got the body of mainly precision manufacturers, and you have a lot of access, and land actually is rather inexpensive. So I think those things have really helped us grow really, you can even see it like just the multifamily side of it. There was in Q1, Q2, Springfield was the fastest growing market on rental increases. I think it was 18%, compared to the previous Q1, Q2 in 2022. So, that tells you right there that people are already looking at this opportunity. And I think we've been really able to capitalize on a lot of new employers, new manufacturers, new distributors coming into this market.
Well, I do know a couple of developers that have.
You may, yeah.
Yeah, and they have the vision.
Yep.
Of what's going to happen in that area, which is very, very unique, because they're pioneers, kind of.
Sure.
they go west, my young man. That's
Oh
what
yeah.
they went west, and they see there's opportunity, lots of opportunity.
Mhm.
And you say traffic. I think that you attract a couple of major corporations that decide we're going to move to Springfield or that area, and bring a lot of their employees there, because now their employees can afford to, everyone's talking about the housing market, you move your company there, your employees now have affordable rental property that
Mhm.
they can rent or even purchase.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a important piece of having a corporation in that area, because now you can attract employees,
Mhm.
you
And I
know.
mean,
So,
you're looking at, right now, like I own and operate a number of multifamily properties with some business partners. And I mean, tell me where you can get a 2-bed in a good area of the city of Worcester or Boston for under $1,300, under $1,400. Not happening. Like you're not getting under, 2,000, 2,500. You're starting to really push into those markets. And that's, I mean, if you look at the interesting thing too, which I don't think a lot of people are aware of, is all the projects that are coming out of the woodwork right now, including, Onyx's work over at, the Eastfield Mall site, that's full. You know what I mean? Like the Court Square project, waiting list. I
right.
mean, so you don't see that, you don't hear about that, and that gives me a lot of grace because an opportunity in this market, because I don't think there is another option for it aside to go up because of how affordable and all the other things I've already spoken about. So, and I think that's why we're really positioned quite well in this market to accommodate that need. We have a very different staffing model. When you normally look at brokerages throughout Massachusetts, Connecticut, especially on an independently owned basis, you got 1 or 2, 3 guys, right? That's really all you got is 3 brokers. I have 10. So we've really positioned our brokerage to really focus on 3 pillars, which most don't focus on, which is marketing, communication, and responsiveness. If you want to see a property, we're going to have somebody available to show you it within hours, not days, not weeks, hours. And I think that's really what's put us, in a very, very good position to accommodate new tenancy requests, new buyer requests, and also a significant amount more listing opportunities.
Well, now let's talk about some of the dirty things that are happening,
Sure.
like the taxes. uh, you know, you do a lot of work in Connecticut as well as Mass. Connecticut has always been a difficult area because they've had some some tax issues with property as
Mhm.
far as properties go, and that was kind of a scary thing for a lot of developers, a lot of people interested in moving there as well. A big enough company, sometimes they can work a tax deal out.
Sure.
But an average Joe maybe wants a 2-story office building, or it's a difficult process for them.
Yeah,
So,
so I think one of the it's a good point because you look at Holyoke, you look at Springfield, they have 2 of the higher commercial tax brackets. I mean, you look at East Longmeadow, they have 2 of the higher commercial tax brackets. But then there's a lot of towns like Agawam, Chicopee, which don't and have a lot of opportunity for development. So that's number 1. Number 2, if we look at it, yes, that's a concern. Everyone's going to complain against on taxes. I do, but here's the deal: my assessments are so far lower, and then the second you hit that 395 corridor, 290, your assessments are going to skyrocket. And so, yes, our taxes might be higher, but our assessments are far lower. And I think the change in tide of the municipalities and the cabinets within the municipalities have shifted focus of, okay, how can we be more business friendly? And I can speak to you like multiple markets within this area that used to be far less business friendly and now are far more business friendly because they understand that that's how they can decrease taxes by bringing in new employers. And that's how they can ease up on the residential tax base. But again, you still look at the price out here, far more reasonable. And so I think that's a driver. But also the other side of it too is look at our education, look at the educational institutions, look at the job market. I mean, you make, $75,000 to $90,000 out here with a good solid job. That's not getting you anywhere in Boston. And so the commutability to those markets where potentially you get paid more, Boston, Worcester, that's why I think this is going to become a commuter market, especially when you have the ability for, and now really a green light on the rail trail. So, an east-west rail, which has been pushed on. Obviously, you can't speak to the timelines on that, and it's a long logistical process. But I think with this most recent funding that was announced, this has really given way that we're going to have it, as opposed to before it was rah, let's see if we can get it. So I think those are huge aspects where, yes, taxes are higher, but I think there's going to be a naturalization on that in this market, given to the fact that the property values are far lower.
And so people understand that this gravy train of this plan now with all the lower rents, the affordable land costs, that's going to change fairly rapidly once people start moving into that area as far as redevelopment or...
Oh, yeah. It's 5 years.
Yeah.
5 years.
Okay.
You're going to see exactly what I think, as long as on a legislative level, they don't pivot. But I think, obviously there's some, we can speak to obviously some of the looming prospective recession with, commercial maturities and rate resets. But I mean, if you look at the Springfield market in particular, in, comparison to the last 4 recessions, we've actually fared well than more places and, candidly in the nation, where the average correction was 18 to 21% on those, recessions, depressions, corrections, whatever you want to call them. We were on average 9 to 11%, meaning because we're not really tourist driven. The main market segments are higher education, medical, precision manufacturing, and government, which are far less likely disturbed in totality than, let's say a major metro. So that's one thing that's also interesting. So we don't boom as much, but we also don't bust as much as well. So, but I do think, given again, Maura Healey's most recent announcement of $4 billion to create 40,000 new housing units. I can't see those going in Boston. Where are you going to put them?
Yeah, there's no place.
So, where are they most likely going to go?
Yeah.
Springfield, Western Massachusetts markets. So where it's much more affordable. And I can tell you right now, we have seen a significant uptick in inquiries, actual deal flow happening in this market as a result of some of that. But even prior to that, I think the deals are still out here. Whereas, the cap rate adjustment really hurt the major metro markets. And also the office, lack of office absorption, I think also hit the major market. Hasn't really hit us. Our deal flow is still extremely strong. And I think that really speaks to people's interest in this market, because our cap rates never really dropped like they did in the major metros. So you can still easily find 8, 9, 10 caps in this market, which, still work within the current rate environment. Where you go anywhere east, sorry, it's not happening.
So now, and we know the mayor of Springfield, he's definitely all gung-ho on creating any kind of new development and bringing business to that area. He's driven for that, which is a positive thing. Anyone that's interested, they definitely have him backing the growth of that area.
Mm-hmm. I can't speak to the mayor's agenda, as I'm not super privy to it, but I can tell you that there has been a significant changing of the guard in Springfield on a legislative level. I think with some of the new people coming into city council, such as individuals like Jose Delgado, who has a significant amount of state level experience, I think is going to really help, move the pieces forward And I think that getting some new blood and also much more of a workable mayoral and city council level in Springfield will be very, very helpful. Because it seemed like there was a lot of there was somewhat of a division there, and I think there's going to be now more of a unified movement, and there needs to be able to capitalize on this prospective opportunity that's coming in from the east, coming out west, and I think that's really helpful.
Okay, let's now talk about the Connecticut market a little.
Sure.
Because I've heard some crazy things about Hartford. The people, it's the population in Hartford has dropped quite a bit because people are trying to get away from that area. Now, I don't know if that's affecting the real estate market there or not. There was some large corporations in the city.
Yeah, so there are a significant amount of large corporations in Hartford, and some have vacated. And same thing up here in Springfield. I mean, you look at, Mass Mutual's moved a lot more towards the Boston, Seaport area, and also out to other markets such as Charlotte and Phoenix, I believe. You look at Smith & Wesson now potentially moving, down to Tennessee. And I think that gives some room to bring new blood in. But one thing I'll say about the Hartford market is Hartford, I think, is different from Springfield because Hartford obviously is much closer to the city. It's also a capital city, whereas Springfield is not. And it's smack dab in the city, center of the state. And so, where I think there has been some major employers that have vacated Connecticut. I can't speak to the why. We can probably make some conclusions as to why, but I think one of the things that was data that came out, and I think this was Q1 of this year, there was a very high influx of apartment occupancy and absorption in the multifamily market, which I think is actually somewhat refreshing. Also, I think too, when you look at, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Connecticut specifically, has a lot of higher learning institutions. It has a significant amount of precision manufacturers, on top of the fact that it is a big entry market for retail QSRs. So we've been seeing a lot. I'm working with actually a QSR right now looking to put 12 locations in the greater Hartford market. So, I think there is a lot of opportunity. I think it's, the media is going to focus on whatever they want to focus on. But there has definitely been a pivot from, the insurance, and I think it's the insurance and CPA capital, like accounting capital of the country. And I think there's definitely been some pivots. But you'll see that, industrially, there's been an extreme expansion on warehousing, because candidly, there's a significant amount of land in a lot of the tobacco fields that are now, and also you have Bradley International Airport. And I think there's a lot of that on the offshoots of 91 on 20, Rainbow Road, Day Hill. I think those are some real huge development opportunities for logistics, which we've seen. Also, we're doing a lot of work. We have a site specifically on Route 5, in the Route 5 291 corridor. And I mean, I can tell you right now, business is alive and well, specifically on the industrial, manufacturing, warehousing, distribution side of it, just because of how easily accessible it is and the property values. But yeah, I think there is some correction. I think it's more of just a pivot to a different type of asset class expansion, which I would state is more on the warehouse and industrial fronts.
Well, I also think, and this is not just in Hartford, this is throughout the country, when the pandemic ended, and even during the pandemic, a lot of companies, a lot of employers kind of reevaluated how their locations were working, and a lot of them figured we downsized, or we moved here, or we moved there. So they might have had a lot of that going on, I'm sure, because Boston also had that same issue. A lot of people were just moving away, and I think it's starting to come back, and New York, it's starting to come back as well. So I'm sure it's probably starting to come back in Hartford also.
Yeah.
Now, Connecticut's a strange market. I've always found it a strange market because there's Northern Connecticut, which is if you talk to anyone, you'd think that Southern Connecticut was a different state.
Oh yeah.
They kind of separate each other from they don't they look at each other as different segments of the state.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that's interesting, and so what previous to me running SR Commercial, as I said, I was a commercial lender, and I was on what was a committee that was called the Knowledge Quarter Committee, which stretches from essentially Greenfield, Massachusetts, all the way down to New Haven. And it has one of the highest densities of higher learning institutions, highest densities of, precision manufacturers. And there's, an insane amount of value there. And one of the things we always talked about is how, it's seen that Northern Connecticut works more as Massachusetts. And, there's a bigger connection between Springfield and Hartford than there is Springfield to Boston and Hartford to New Haven. And so, and the reason being is because we're within 35 minutes of each other. Right. And there's a lot of people that work in Connecticut and live in Massachusetts and vice versa. So there's that really tight relationship. And I think that's the reason why. And, like I can tell you right now, I'm probably down in the Hartford market. And I can tell you Paul my business partner is down in Hartford probably, every single, if not every other day. Whereas you don't normally say that when you're in Bridgeport or New Haven. You're talking more, maybe you're in the city.
Right, New York.
Exactly, as opposed to, I was up in Massachusetts. So, or even up in Hartford. So I think there's definitely siloing. And you can even say that about, the hills, like the Western Hills, like the Litchfield Hills area. And then also like the Wyndham area, 395 corridor. When I was at First Niagara, I used to work that Putnam, Danielson, that whole corridor. And that's on its own too. That's more like Rhode Island. So like, I think Hartford, because it's part of the tri-state area, is torn in a lot of different directions. And I wouldn't say lacks identity, but it's a very pivotal, piece of the puzzle of other states' success, including its own. But I think, at the bare minimum, Hartford does have a lot of the pieces that Springfield has. It also has a lot more traction given that it's the capital region. So I think but Hartford in general and Connecticut in general is very siloed into different areas. But Massachusetts is the same because, you look at Berkshire County, where I grew up, is like where dragons fly around. And I can say that because I'm from there. Right. But we say Western Massachusetts out here in Springfield, but when you're in the Berkshires, you don't say Western Massachusetts, you say the Berkshires. It's like an independent republic over there. So but we still work out there, but people in the Berkshires don't come out here.
Right.
So, and then people in Boston think that this is New York when you get beyond Worcester. So I think that can be said with any state.
Yeah, you're probably right. Well, I know you're right. So you have been in this market for how many years now? 20?
Between the commercial banking side and brokerage side, about 17 years.
17. So in your final words before we go off the air, tell me what you have seen change and tell me what you see going forward as being a visionary.
Well, I appreciate that accolade. I don't know if I can live up to it. However, I think that,
we won't hold it to anything.
I appreciate that. Big shoes to fill there. So I think, if I would say that, the vision for the industry is, I think that lone wolf agent in the commercial world, I think is going to have a lot of trouble in the next 10 years. I think there's a major pivot coming, which I really want to say that we're on the forefront of, which is, how do you represent a client? And I think that requires a lot more marketing, a lot more, engagement from a broker or an agent. And then, I think it's more of a concierge style service. I don't think it's you slap a sign up and, you hope to get calls because at the end of the day, hope's not a strategy. And so I can tell you that when the way that we're working, we are a much more, holistic approach to sales. And I think that's the way it's going to be moving forward. And you've already seen it, listen, I can say the big C word that no one wants to talk about, which is CoStar. But they're coming after our jobs. I don't care what anyone says. Zillow did it to residential agents. CoStar is going to do it to commercial agents. And, I can see a disassociation of commercial brokers wanting to work with CoStar and other brokerage, other opportunities popping up like Crexy, My E-Listing. There's a bunch of them out there. But I think it's the lone wolf approach, I don't think is going to work anymore. And if you look at the median age of commercial brokers, specifically in the Hartford market and the Springfield and Western, and candidly across the nation, it's just like our trades. We don't have a lot of young blood coming into this industry, and that's because we haven't made it easy, or we haven't decreased or lowered the barriers to get into this industry, or to make it interesting enough, candidly. And so I think that's one of the things that we've tried to change and pivot. Our median age is 30 years old. It's 20 years younger than the median age of the majority of groups in the market. So, and again, I think it's about a pivot of approach. And I think this industry is one of the last to be disrupted. And I think that's going to happen. And I hope it does.
Yeah, and I never even thought of that. But, I do these events for commercial real estate throughout New England. And I can tell you that I can see the people that attend, people that have been in this industry for quite a long time. The younger people, not so much. I probably see 1% of my attendees, young people. Mm-hmm. Most of them are people that have been in the industry for 15 plus years.
Yep.
Some 60 years.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. The people that have been in the industry for 15 years are actually the young ones now, which is interesting. And that's the thing. There is no feeder system. There is no, good, AAA, AA system. And I think commercial banking is experiencing the same thing. And the question that we get a lot is how do you have so many young agents? Well, I just make this much more engaging, fun, and it's not the rigid structure that a lot of the bigs have, because things need to change. And that's why, I left a cushy bank job to come and build this. And I'm having a blast doing it with the great people at this company. So
Jeremy, if someone want to find out more information on your company and yourself, do you have a website?
Yeah, of course. So it's srcommercialre.com, or you can always call us or email me. My email, can I say that on here? Is that cool?
Sure. And at the end of this video, it won't show up on the podcast platforms, but at the end of this video, we'll have the listing of all your contacts, your contact listing.
Yeah, so it's Jeremy at srcommercialre.com. And listen, if you're thinking about getting into this industry, I'd love to talk to you. I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I think it's a great industry to work in, and I can't wait to see what it does in the next 10 to 15 years.
Great information, Jeremy. Love always talking to you.
You too. Appreciate it.
Always interesting. And, I love hearing about what's going on in the western part of the state, because like I said, for the longest time, no one ever talked about it. It was not even part of the state.
Yeah, we're New York. We're New York, Connecticut. We're definitely now we are, because they're putting rail here. But for the longest time, we didn't even have fees on the Mass Pike. I mean, what does that tell you?
Well, there was only a few cars that were driving on it. So
exactly, that's what they thought. Now we have fees.
That's what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
All those fees start coming into place also.
Correct.
Well, thanks again, Jeremy. We're talking with Jeremy Casey from SR Commercial. And you heard Jeremy's website was srcommercialre.com.
Yeah.
And thank you again, Jeremy.
Thank you.
And you've been listening to NYREJ Podcast. I'm Rick Kaplan. Till next time.